So, this is the agenda for the day that I'd like to cover off. I'm going to talk about a little bit of context. My first experience with bid management was building a pulp and paper mill. I was straight out of university and I was in Fletcher Challenge, and I was given the job to be project implementation administrator on this job. We were working with Rust out of America. Had 5 consultants on our job, and on another job they had in South America, the plane with all their engineers on went down and they lost their team. Some of our team were pulled back into America, and it taught me everything I needed to know about risk management, because we lost 2 of our key team, but that other project lost everybody. So those sort of things you don't learn about until you actually see them in your journey of life. With New Zealand Defence Force, the first project I was involved with really of significance was when I left Housing New Zealand. And somebody said to me, "You know how government procurement works? I've got a job to bid for with Defence." And it was with the Yaka Group, in those days owned by the Laidlaw family out of Australia, and they hired me as bid manager on that job, and then I was the implementation manager and on the board there as an advisor through the implementation phase. So it was quite interesting to see Peter Cunningham this morning, because he was Lieutenant Colonel in those days, and he was the bid manager from a defence point of view. And I think that was one of the early contracts that had a 15-year life, just been renewed. I remember in the first weeks we lost a pair of socks, and I think through the duration of the contract that's about how bad it's been. So it's been quite a good success story. Right up until today, when I'm still involved, doing some work with supply chain training with Air Force, and helping industry to respond to bid opportunities. There's a couple current, so I can't talk about those. But I'm going to give you a picture of one of my worst stories and one of my best stories from the point of view of clients and their structure and strategy of how they engage to win market opportunities. I had a quick look back over the last 4 years, and the clients that we've been working with, Bernie, me and others, about 5.5 billion of successful contracts with government through bid management excellence that they take on as clients, lead themselves, and bring advisors in as required. So just looking at this agenda, I thought I might start with this, and to think of your organisation on this profile, these continua of where do you sit? Because on one side is my worst story, and on the other side is the best. From my most recent 18 months of engagement with bid management and support to clients, when you look at the transactional approach, the tactical, the traditional, the responsive, rather than the proactive, I'm a generalist rather than a specialist. I know my niche, I don't know my niche, I don't know my competitors, I know my competitors, all of those extremes. So on the left-hand side, we have a company that has 150 employees in New Zealand, and 20 of them are in the bid office. On the right-hand side, we have a company in New Zealand who has solely government work. Both clients are government orientated. Solely government work. 63 staff 4 years ago, going to 120. Regionally based up until 8 months ago. Now with about 120 staff across New Zealand. And if you look at that, that's built on 6 bids submitted and this win percentage. Sorry, 8 wins. They won 6. The left-hand side brought us in to see what they could do about their 17% win rate. At least they knew it was 17%. I've got other clients that haven't got a clue what value success rate they had until they actually try and understand and interrogate that. So where do you sit in the way you approach your client opportunity? In this particular case, the characteristics of the client on the right are they have no bid team. They take the best people out of their organisation roles who know their business, whether they're in the warehouse, whether they're in operations, whether they're in production, customer management, how they're going to run the service centre, how they're going to run support, how they're going to run the web, how they're going to run IT, how they're going to run their billing system, how they're going to actually manage the contract. They take the best people out of their business right from the outset. They share the bid documentation. They've pre-engaged probably 18 months to 2 years in advance. And that group of people sit down and review the bid document from the start, word to word for a week, and at the end of that week, we have a strategy planning session. And they bring bid management in only to coordinate how that team works, and they bring a bid writer in so that the different perspectives from the multiple participants are actually coordinated with one voice from that professional writer able to put the same language across all of the bid response. This little business on the right will have 120 people by the end of November, and it will be turning over about 120 million. The business on the left was doing about 150. It had a single client. It's now doing about 100. It's still got the same single client, and that single client is not winning opportunities, so they're actually really struggling in New Zealand. The New Zealand general manager's gone, and they're trying to rationalise their bid strategy, and what they're doing is they're taking people out of the bid office and putting business development people into the market, going to find out what the customer wants rather than telling the customer what they can do for the customer. And as a result, we're starting to see some shift in the behaviours and success rate on that client on the left. Well, where do you sit? Now, if you look at on this, if we look at this continuum across there, the answer will be somewhere between those two numbers. And I just use that as a quick metric with most of my clients. Let's talk about how pre-engaged you are. And a lot of the themes that I'm going to talk about have been covered, but I'm looking at it from how does industry respond and increase your chances of taking a level playing field for everybody to respond to advantage for you to win. Because you as industry want to win the bid. I as your advisor want you to win the bid, particularly if we've done it on success only. That tends to help. So, this was just, there's so much information about bid management on the internet, and there's so much information about New Zealand bid management and organisations like Shipley's and others who provide training in this space. But one of the key themes, and I'm reminded of the work we did with Yaka, is that 65% of the effort, and I'm not sure about the dollars, but I wouldn't see it as much different, is expensed before the tender hits GETS. If it's on GETS and that's the first you know about it, you're too late. The second characteristic of a successful respondent that's in that Business New Zealand internet site that I had a look at was whole organisation engagement. It goes back to my client on the right rather than my client on the left. They don't see it as management's job to respond. They see it as the organisation's job to respond because the organisation has to deliver, and it's everybody in the organisation having to understand the bid. So the warehouse manager, who's not particularly literate, he's come up from being a dispatcher and a receipter, but who's now managing that team of 17 in the warehouse, is an integral part of our bid management team for that client. So that would be similar in the context of making sure that across the organisation, if you're bidding, is it your bid team, is it a sales effort, or is it actually a business relationship effort that's going into this wood? And I know with the Yaka opportunity that the conversations that were going on with Defence for about 18 months before the RFP hit the market allowed those clients that were looking to respond to really understand it, for the RFP to be positioned with options. Dealing with one bid for ACC for a client at the moment, and we struck a good idea, we thought, and we put it back to the bid manager office, the communications person that was advised, and as a result, what ACC did is they advised all respondents that they were holding the bid process because there'd been a suggestion of an alternative proposition for the solution proposed. They put that to the board, and the board said yes, and the bid was then re-released with the opportunity to have a national contract rather than a regional contract, and the client went ahead and won on the national contract basis because they were able to leverage scale and some other sensible things that identified as competitive opportunities. Don't try and sell, but understand what the client's problem is. What's the pain point that's led to this opportunity? I've got a client who's really successful in rolling existing contracts, really successful in understanding that current performance dictates future opportunity. If your business references are not your current clients, don't expect to win. I know you'll put up references, and I do, from the people that I choose, but when I'm working on the defence side or when I'm working on an agency side, I ask for other client lists, and I will pick who I want to go and talk to or advise the agency. These people also supply to these DHBs or these schools or these other communities. Why don't we go and talk to some of them, because they haven't put them up as references, because there might be some issues that they're actually pain points that are not being identified in their respondents. One of the key things about early engagement is you find out the innuendo, the inference, and what's not written in the document. The opportunity to understand when there are options in there, what's the real preference. The opportunity to understand whether you can actually put together an aggregated deal across the 3 services or whether it's going to be single service, particularly if you're in the service space and looking at some of those supplies that go across the whole of the sector. Do you really understand what's being looked for? And when you read the document, as Wendy was just talking about with the Canadian experience, if you don't have that pre-engagement in there, there's the opportunity to ask questions. But don't answer the question that you think is being asked. Answer the one that you know is being asked. Because often what happens is, that's what I think they're asking, but it might actually be something different. So, and I've had that recently with a couple of bids where we inferred something, and then we asked the question, and what we'd inferred was wrong. So just, there's no reason not to ask a question, and the worst answer you can get is the question that we've asked or the information that you've got is there, and then you can answer that. But if you don't ask the question, the answer you've always got is no. And what's the worst answer you can get? No. So you're no worse off by asking the question. And that's a real key strategy for both for personal learning, for understanding how these processes work. So this is the advice that we typically give people is where to start. And obviously, well in advance of opportunities, there are so many information sources about what's going on in defence. We've got the defence industry plan, we've got the capability plan, we've got Future 35, we know what's intended, we see the investment, talking about platforms and capabilities they're going to change. You look at the comments that CDF made yesterday around people capability. What does that mean for those people in developing skill sets, universities, training organisations, people that develop skills across organisations? Lots of opportunities, but you need to know your client. So find that out. And also things like this and the social opportunities to have conversations with people, because when the RFP's out, those channels still exist, but no answer is valid unless it comes back through the document, as Phil Blundell said yesterday. So whoever's the authorised contact becomes your channel, and sometimes the people in service say, well, I can't actually talk to you because it's an RFP in process, and that's fair as well. Make sure you're talking about specific opportunities, and then we've seen today, what's happening with the Anzac frigates, what's happening with the capability upgrades, what's happening with the T6, all of those processes. We did some work with the T6 project in terms of that project team early on, and I really enjoyed that, and to see the result and where that's landed has been really positive. Do you know the urgency and timing and when these things are coming, and if you don't, and you leave it to when it's on gets you too late? So can you go back into that defence conversation, talk to Fraser if you don't know who to get to, talk to Des Ashton, but also look at this new opportunity and this new portal that's coming from defence. Until it's there will still be other needs to communicate with defence and find those gates. And so how do you get that network? When I did some work with the DIA around their strategic plan early in the year, one of the things that we did was I talked to a whole lot of new members of the industry association, and they said one of the huge benefits was when I talk to Fraser and I say, this is what I want to find out, Fraser will ring me back the next day and say, this is the person you need to talk to. You should be using those sorts of channels to make sure you're getting to the right person. Talked about, is your current performance valued? One of the big issues in some of the work that I'm doing, and I was talking to one of my Air Force colleagues over lunch and just saying I'm doing a bit of work in health and ACC and stuff like that at the moment, and the governance models are incredibly complicated in some organisations. If you're looking at a major project in defence, make sure you know where the decision-making authority sits. who's the key decision maker, who's got the signature, and have that relationship. For one client, that meant that we needed to introduce them to the minister. We needed to introduce them to CDF. We needed to introduce them to Charlie Law and others, so that it wasn't a name appearing on a page that they had never established a relationship with. Make sure that you are known amongst the decision making and governance. And one of my, I suppose the thing that had the most impact on me when I was learning all this stuff, when I was in industry in particular, at IBM, is they say if you haven't got 9 points of contact with the client, don't expect to get the one signature. So you have the CEO contact. What's your escalation channel? If it's not working at this, if you escalate it in your organisation, how does defence escalate it? And if they're escalating it to the same person, it's not escalation. So how do we make sure that the relationships are at multi-levels? One of the key things I do is I never let the CEO, if we're in negotiation phase of a contract, participate in the conversation unless the CEO on the other side's there as well, because there's no escalation path. So the contract negotiation team will be negotiating, but it's resolved and finalised if there's need to escalate. Those sorts of things are really important in a governance context. And we've talked at nauseam over 2 days about total cost of ownership. I think there's a long way to go in what I'm seeing organisations deliver around better business cases. The requirement for one of my clients at the moment is a 15-year plus 15-year opportunity. It's going to be broken into 5 and 10 and 15. And planning through life support and total cost of ownership for 30 years and having a business model that has got price escalation and all the other things because it's fixed price is pretty complex. And then how do you index that? How do you allow for variation? How do you allow for new technology, which is inevitably going to be part of that? And then having that, as Lamwin was talking about earlier, having that open relationship within that contract structure that results. Because winning the bid isn't winning the bid, it's how you turn it on and how you manage it, and you can put the document in the drawer and forget about it because the relationship works. And the relationship starts before the RFP goes out. It's that continuity through that process. And so as a vendor to defence, where's your relationship? So this is a little slide that I use teaching supply chain in the Air Force how to manage the vendors and increase their power. In terms, you could be a small supplier, or in defence context, we're a small user on a world scale of a single platform capability. But how do I use the power and the information that I have around that supplier relationship to influence the nature of where that relationship heads? So if you're a small industry player and you want to have some significance, how do you find your power is relative to what the problems that the defence is trying to solve? If you come in, I can sell you this, that's about telling, and it's about switching the mentality to understand what is it that defence needs and how can you go away and come back with some ideas that meet that need so that when you make contact, you are a person they want to talk to, an industry that they want to talk to, an individual that's got ideas, innovation and opportunity, controlled innovation I'd call that, so that we've actually got a deliverable value proposition as well. Because at the end of the day, the closer you can get to partnership, and if we think about what Alicia said about where the major opportunities are, and those major opportunities are in prime vendors and then you as smaller relationships into the primes, that's all partnership and collaboration. And it's about industry opportunity, not necessarily company opportunity. So we're growing the pie or we're actually competing for the same one. You know, old metaphors, but they still ring true. I've got a client whose relationship is way down here, and that's my client on the left. I've got my client on the right from my early slides, and they are way up there. They're doing a really good job. And it's how they hired me originally was the husband and wife owner wanted to retire, and all of their superannuation was tied up in the business because they had no exit strategy. So I do a little bit of that stuff as well, which is a bit of fun. And then it's about your competitive landscape, and are you going to compete or are you going to cooperate? Do you have a point of difference? Some people think they do, but does the client value that point of difference and understand that? There's no, I mean, I had 8 years in supermarketing, And we would say good enough is not good enough, because it is that mediocrity thing that Charlie was talking about earlier in the day. If you're just good enough, you're not going to be that differentiator, you're not going to be able to compete, so how do you then collaborate to actually fill the slots that the Prime's looking to fill across that whole-of-life costing, whole-of-life opportunity, through-life support requirement? Is your current performance your testimonial or your Achilles heel? I've sort of talked about that a bit. Know your competitors. Are those competitive advantages absolute? In other words, nobody can copy them, therefore you're it. And therefore you can put IP on that and you can price that in accordingly. If they're a me too strategy, then there's no price differential in your offer. Where's the differential going to come from? It's from your flexibility, your relationship, your understanding of the need, your ability to manage that. And at the end of the day, this whole process is looking to actually shift the level playing field in your favour because of the quality of your response. Collaboration. I think we've seen some really good examples of that in defence. We saw an example up here on the stage with the P3K2 project. That's a supplier and customer relationship. But do you generally engage in collaboration to actually grow the opportunity? So the bid's there and you're doing a strategic evaluation. Can you win on your own? Is this a strategic opportunity that you have been targeting and it's something that you absolutely value and want, must have, and do you have the point of difference that's going to generate that, or can you generate that difference with somebody else who can complement the skills that you bring? So it's not a all or nothing, it's an opportunity to actually participate in the outcome. And you will see in defence that the presentation this morning and yesterday is moving towards long-term. And in a traditional New Zealand government procurement sense, historically it was the 3-year contract and price down the next 3 years and then price down the next 3 years. I don't think we're going to see that in the very near term be normal. It'll be gone. Because if you look at what's going on around consolidation of procurement, you look around centralisation, as Charlie talked about this morning, it's happening in the other sectors of defence as well. So while this might be a defence-related strategy of how to win a bid, it actually works across other sectors as well. Don't be long-term in your strategic thinking, because then you're just tactical. You're not being strategic. And traditionally, we might even have been transactional. So there's some new processes around, and we've been talking about those. Certainly Philip Blundell talked about them yesterday in terms of the Government Rules of Sourcing. My copy of Government Rules of Sourcing is almost destroyed. I need to print another copy because it's my reference guide in the work that I do. When we're advising clients about this, and as I said, I'm doing it in health and education, ACC, all sorts of places at the moment, for clients, these rules determine how we respond to those opportunities, how we extend the timeline. I was talking to somebody at breakfast this morning who's on the DIA board, and he said he's responding to a tender for defence that came out last Thursday and closes on Friday. I said, it's outside the rules. It's outside the rules. Challenge the rules. He said, oh, no. We think that's a competitive advantage to complete by Friday. I said, can you do it by Friday? He said, well, it's going to be a push and we're just about going to kill some people. I said, so can you do it by Friday? And they got an extension today. So it's that sort of thinking is pushed back and say, what are the rules of sourcing? They're there to help you as industry know that government is trying to use best practice buying and can standardise the processes across sectors. Defence is a really good client to sell to. I've always found that. I haven't had difficulty. I've lost contracts for sure, and otherwise, you don't price them all right and you don't get the offer right all the time. But it's important that you understand the context and the processes that are going on the other side. One of the things I always try and find out is who's on the evaluation panel. And do I have a relationship with them historically, or who do I know that does? It's a bit like the jury stuff that they do in America, those jury analysts. They analyse the jury and say, make sure this person doesn't get on. Well, you know who's on, and you know what their pet buttons are. Make sure you don't just tailor the response to what's written there. You've got to put the innuendo and the inference in about your capability that opens up the possibility to get on the shortlist. Because an RFP could be closed with a contract, but more often than not, it's going to be closed with a conversation to a contract. And that conversation opener is what you have to put in that document. It's like putting a CV up for a job. If you put everything in the CV, they can decide to interview you or not because you've told them everything. Tell them everything they need to know and leave a couple of hooks. Some options, you know, the compliant bid is a must. I've got a client that put a non-compliant bid in and then complained that they didn't win. I said, well, you didn't comply in the first instance. You have to comply in the first instance and then tailor your offer that gives the client defence the understanding that you are looking to improve on what they are looking for within cost, or you've found a way to deliver the same outcome. Think of outcomes, not inputs. We're looking at an outcome for a less cost and a better value. And I know that the Yakka contract was the most expensive offer of the bids. It's 15 years out of cycle. You can find that sort of stuff out. The reason it was so successful is 75 people in uniform were able to come out of clothing supply and move into defence deployment and other applications and postings. And we took stock from this level to this, and we delivered on time and a few other things that were hot buttons. So that's straight off the MB website. It talked about time, the 10-day rule for GETS advertising. You know, it's tailored now to the specific procurement. So make sure you know how long it's going to take to respond. You can have a shorter time, you can have longer, you can ask. If I've got a tender that we've just got for another client, has no evaluation criteria in it. I can't believe that's still happening, but people haven't got there yet. Ask the question, make sure you know that those are the evaluation criteria, and then what we do, this really good client of mine, the guy on the right, or the industry on the right, they take every question and they put the evaluation criteria against them. So this tender response is being evaluated on these 4 or 5 criteria with this weighting. Where's the weighting? How much are we going to put into the response? And particularly if you're using Smart Procure and you've got a limited window space, where's the emphasis in our response around this question going to be against the evaluation criteria? So you're doing a 3-dimensional matrix. The evaluation criteria are being considered in every question that you're answering, because those are the criteria. And then when you challenge, if you're not successful, you get more information about where you went wrong so that you've got a better chance of being successful the next time. This is pretty much standard Procurement 101. I'm not here to teach Procurement 101. This is what Philip covered yesterday in terms of how Defence buys, in terms of that process. Better pictures from MB than I've got, but that's essentially what is, from the information gathering. Just a reminder that a request for information is not allowed to be used for a shortlisting. Has happened, does happen. Don't let it happen. Because a request for information is to provide scope for the RFP. It's an opportunity to engage. It's setting you up to scope and structure the RFP to your favour if you've got a point of difference and opportunity, so that when it's out there and the industry's responding, your response is actually going to be able to be positioned relative to your strengths. And in that request for information phase is really that pre-engagement specific, but we should have been engaging before that generally. So this is essentially what Philip covered off yesterday, so I wasn't going to go into that in detail. One of the worst behaviours that my client on the left had was they responded to every tender that came across the tender manager's desk. So they were in a specific industry that's tender driven. You can sort of picture what it's going to be. And getting them to see that it was okay to not respond probably took a year. What's your win strategy? What's your bid, no bid strategy? And if you haven't got one, that's where I would start. Have you pre-engaged on this opportunity, or have I seen it on GETS? Drop it. Do I know the pain points, the unstated context, the implied implications? Have I got a relationship where I can probe this RFP and have that question about my IP? How am I going to protect my IP? Do I know all of that stuff? I need to engage. Can I engage? Yes, keep going. Now that I've engaged, do I know what the answers to those are, and am I going to get through the gate? No, disengage. There's a wonderful saying, and it's a very old saying from William Shakespeare, and it's about you're in so far that you don't get out and you keep burning the money. I know bids, I mean, I can't tell you the number, but I can tell you it's millions of dollars that a client has spent over 3 years, not immediately, but in the recent past, looking to win a major industry opportunity in Australia and New Zealand. And it's a lot more than 4 million. They spent 18 months on the bid, and it's still not resolved. Whereas I look at that little client that did that ACC job, 3 months from response to implementation approval, contract signed, 3 months to implement, and done. If you're targeted and you've got the relationship and you know the client, they are not going to string you along. This other contract is complicated by governance, it's complicated by Australia decisions linked to New Zealand decisions, very complex, and they don't listen. As an advisor, you need to listen. If you hired somebody to give you advice, you need to take the advice. You don't need to accept the advice, and we're not going to get precious about it, but we did advise you to stop, and you kept going, and you're now another $1 million down the drain, and you're further into Macbeth's blood. And thus we go to the Battle of Dunstanane, and we end. So know when to get out of that, that can I win, the bid, no bid process. I mean, there are probably 10 experiences in the last 4 or 5 years since I left corporate and came back into consulting that really are examples of this. But the best example I will give you of when to stop. The managing director of Foodstuffs, a guy called Hugh Perrott, and Coca-Cola were sitting in the room at Foodstuffs in Auckland. And a new general manager from Australia was coming in to negotiate. This is how Coca-Cola does business in New Zealand. You've heard this story, I think. And what he said sort of didn't sit with how Foodstuffs does business in New Zealand. So the executive of Foodstuffs left their boardroom and left the Coca-Cola management negotiation team in the Foodstuffs boardroom, and the Foodstuffs guys just went about their business. And they stayed there for an hour and a half and then left. The next day, there was a directive from the CEO of Foodstuffs to all Pack and Save owners to destock Coca-Cola for 6 weeks. During that 6 weeks, there was not one order placed on Coca-Cola for Coca-Cola products by Foodstuffs. The Coca-Cola general manager who'd been appointed to New Zealand got recalled to Australia, and he left. Know your client. Listen to what the client's saying. Don't tell your client what you can do for them. Understand what your client's need is, their point of difference, why this Coke offer wasn't going to work for Foodstuffs, because it was all about central delivery, and Foodstuffs is an aggregated, it's a cooperative, they do it smart. But he didn't stop. He kept going, and 6 weeks of Pack and Save turnover would be an awful lot of money for Coca-Cola. Know when to stop. One of the other key things about a bid is this governance we've talked about, and your internal governance. So if you are a New Zealand arm of a multinational, make sure you've got the bid funding to put the bid together if it's going to be a long drawn-out process and it's going to be a differential cost to your business. If you need to put a bid resource in or you need a bid manager in, I mean, I worked on a project where there were 41 in the bid team for 18 months. Had to be funded offshore, but that was a pretty big project. It's well gone now, but it was a lot of fun. We ended up building something pretty significant. It's called the Sky Tower. In my Fletcher days, it was a lot of fun. Couldn't go to the World Cup though. Damn, that's funny. Okay, sorry. And then the last thing when you're going through this bid, no bid decision at the first gate is not only do you have the internal governance, but have you got somebody in your team or somebody who knows your business that can drive the strategy, and treat it like a project. A bid response is a project. It could be a short project, it could be a small team, but treat it like a project with milestone reviews, progress allocations. When I'm doing the bid management for this little client over here, I just go in as the bid manager. We assign the strategic workshop, and we have that as the kickoff point of view. We allocate the subject matter expertise to every question. We set up the governance for the duration, and we finish the bid a week before it's due for an external peer review. Because you can get store blind. You know what you know, and you can believe your own BS, frankly. And you need somebody to tell you that it's BS, so that you challenge and you get somebody that knows the organisation or knows the client to be an independent, confidential peer review. And that has made significant difference in taking that client on the right from in the 70s to up to 86%, because they're getting that independent review capability. And then we go to we're going to bid. Where does it sit? If it's not in your strategy, well, what on earth are you doing bidding? And where does it sit for the client strategy? And if we think about all of those capability platforms, the large strategic $16 billion worth of investment, the property estate, there aren't any members that I can see of the DIA that are construction and property organisations, and yet I hear Peter Cunningham talking today. Where are those organisations building the relationship with Defence to understand what the estate opportunities are? I'm sure they are, but the opportunity to leverage that through organisations and events like this should be part of their strategic thinking, you would think, if they're going to take the opportunity of that $5 or $6 billion investment in the estate. So are you looking at an opportunity up here in the high value, high impact opportunity? And when we're talking supply chain and component management and all the other things we do, we actually do the same stuff about this component supply relationship. Is it strategic? Is it a transactional? Can I use MRP? The same sorts of segmentation principles apply to everything in business. How are you segmenting the opportunities that you are going to bid on with your limited resources and your budget constraints? Because bid doesn't generate revenue, it generates cost until it's won. But when it's won, that adds cost until it's implemented, and implementation's king. So we'll get to that shortly. Oh, stopped. Right. So I now know whether it's a strategic product, a strategic positioning opportunity. It might be strategic for my brand, so I might want to chase it. It might be strategic for Defence, so I might want to chase it. But who has the power, and can we win? So another one of those key questions in that bid, no bid is, can we win? And then what we do is we have a strategy workshop after we've had the first one, which says how to win. What are the things we're going to do differently in our business? This little organisation on the right that I started the class with was, they have a standard suite of they're a small company, but they have a standard suite of every standard process in the organisation kept current in a folder called Bid Management. And none of it is branded with client-specific targeting. It's all their branding. And the last bid they did was really clever. They said to the organisation they were responding to, look, we could give you everything that you have asked for, but given you're looking for a technology-based solution, why don't we create a dedicated portal on our website, and we will put all of the ancillary information in the appendices on this website, and you can go through them at your leisure, and we'll make them all available to you so that our bid response document will be about 80 pages instead of being all of the attachments of health and safety and procedures and customer service and all the other things that are necessary. The government client loved it. We counted the hits, and there were nearly 1,100 hits on that website during the evaluation process. So they were looking, and they had access to that information. It wasn't different people, it was different times and different hits and different information being sought. So they might have wanted to know how our website worked in terms of some of the service provision or access to equipment or other supplies, and they could channel into that website just to have a look at things that have been set up dedicated. Another thing that I've seen when I've been evaluating bids is the cut and paste, but it's still got the brand on from the people they were responding to last time. That's not going to win. What's the key message that's missing when you do that? What was it? What do you think? not customizing, but from a point, think about the message that sends to me if I'm looking down the track a bit and I'm looking to appoint you and you've not paid due attention to that detail. Are you going to be a detailed attention provider to my needs? And that's another benefit of having that independent peer review and that copywriter, bringing the same story together, but making sure all your branding's consistent and you haven't stuck in a brand for the police when you're responding to defence or something like that. It wasn't that bad, but it was a lot worse. 2 construction competitors. Very interesting. So then it's, the government process, you've decided you're going to win, you decided you're going to bid, you've made the commitment, you've got a budget, you've got a project team, you've got the leadership in place. This is what good organisations do. There's a process in the organisation for bid management. Sometimes it's a bid office. I'm trying to encourage people not to use bid offices, but to use organisational expertise managed by an internal bid office if that's the right strategy. In large organisations, absolutely, you need a business development team that's doing contract expiry and review and all of that stuff. But bidding should be a standard process. It shouldn't be, oh, we've got another bid. Where do we start? You should be able to pull out a template. Your process for your bid management needs to be specific to your business. Plan that strategy session at the start. You sit down with the executive of the organisation and then you second in the SMEs. You make your no-bid decision, your bid decision. You look at your information and detail gaps, but you do that from a point of view of what's the client looking for and can I answer the question? Do I understand this question? In fact, what we do is we create a question log, same as a risk log and an issues log and all those sort of things, but the most important one is the questions log. And we talk to the respondent organisation that we're responding to and say, look, we're going to send all our questions in hits. We're not going to send you them in a drip feed, so on Monday you'll get a question set and there'll be 14. And then the next set come in. If you use a data room type response methodology, which some of the large consulting firms do, and that's a good process, all of the question logs are there, who asked them, and what the response is there as well. More often than not, the data room is set up by the issuing organisation. So if you're using Smart Procure with Defence, you go into Bravo, your response will be there, the questions are posted, and you can see those answers. But make sure you know whether you understand those questions. One of the key questions in terms of that detail gap is sometimes in that pre-engagement you might have made in writing the bid and the RFP, you might identify that what your pre-engagement has been misunderstood and how it's been interpreted and languaged in the RFP. Challenge it. As a result of that, that's when ACC changed their process and had that halt and then a reissue. If you are looking at a contract extension, contract renewal, or you're in the business at the moment and it's a contract, new opportunity, new RFP, what's different? And why is it different? If you can answer the question, what are they looking for in making that change? Because often what we do is we know what we've always done is going to get what we've always got. Defence is looking to make a change, but we're going to respond with this is what we do. You're not going to win. What are they looking for and what do we have to do differently to win that? Can we evidence that? And actually, have we been evidencing that in our other clients? So I think one of the really smart things that a client did recently is they identified in an upcoming opportunity some capability they thought was going to be required in an RFP from another sector. And they implemented a pilot of that application in one of their existing client contracts. As a result, people who are evaluating this RFP are actually able to see the new solution operating in another environment. So they've been innovative in their existing contracts with a view to win. It wasn't required and they're not getting funded for it in their existing client, but they know it's positioning a better offer in the long term. Take that innovative approach to how to use your current business as evidence and testimonial of your capability to win. One of the worst habits I see is governance changing strategy on submission day. If you're the managing director and you've assigned this project to somebody, make sure they're doing it. Because another recent case, that Bernie rang me on a Sunday night and he said, what are you doing this week? And I said, oh, I'm working over here. He said, no, you're not. I said, well, I have to because I'm committed to that. He said, we've just got a call from Australia. I won't tell you what industry because that sort of gives it away a wee bit. But client's CEO has just identified that the internal team has done no work on the bid. It's due in on Friday. When we got the information on the Monday, and they had a team that was commissioned on the Sunday, one of them was in Perth, one of them was in Cook Islands, one of them was in Papua New Guinea, one was in Sydney, and two were in Melbourne. And we were coordinating this from Auckland. It was quite interesting, time zone stuff, but what was most interesting is that the COO had done nothing with that bid for 3.5 weeks. And we got it. And when you were analysing it, it was worth more than 37 million of capital investment if they won it. And on the Thursday, we got an extension until the Monday, and we delivered it on the Sunday to Perth. But they paid a lot of money to get that done in a week. And I don't think they did justice to the client. It's still in negotiation, and they are in negotiation. But in that process, somebody else has joined the opportunity because it was a closed tender, and they didn't know it was a closed tender. And how many respondents do you think they were looking for in the closed tender? So these guys have really dropped the ball. And they're a big organisation, big organisation. So if you're the CEO and you're delegating it, inspect what you expect. Good business practice. Set the strategy as the CEO. If you are the bid respondent, manage up. Make sure that the governance isn't going to be deadline interrupters. And set up your project team to be able to have a week's grace to refine it, smooth it, peer review it, and get the outcome. In the old days, we used to be able to impact our projects. So if you ever saw the Yaka document, it's about that wide. It's a really, I was quite proud of it at the time. I thought that was a really scary thing to do. I brought it down to Wellington on a plane to make sure it got here on time. We do that for clients sometimes when we're deadline driven. Learned a lot of lessons in recent days around that. And make sure you've got a team and you're managing the team to do the bid. Present it in different ways. Talked about treating it as a project, that review of tender, the work plan. I mean, these are just good project disciplines that Defence will be expecting of you in delivering this and turning it on, because at the end of the day, the bid is only the opportunity to engage in contract. And the engaging in contract will all be subject to your ability to execute and implement. So if your implementation plan is lacking, or your acceptance of contract terms is lacking, or your clarity on what you want to change in the contract is lacking, you're not providing that opportunity for conversation. Another deadline problem is the financials don't get done to the last minute. The languaging of the strategy informs the financials, but the financials informs the outcome, and then you have to recycle. So are you, what we used to call in Fletcher's, the snaking process, are you taking it back to the board, are you taking it back to the team, so that through that duration across those weeks, you're actually getting a common understanding in the project team of where this is going to land. And I heard Wendy joke about accountants earlier. We used to call them the Department of No. So that was a very interesting thing at Fletcher Challenge. Some of the things you should do: put your best people on the team. Hiring us to do a bid for you is no good because we don't know your business. We can run the process, but we can't win the bid for you. We can give you the strategy, techniques, and process, but it's your business, your ideas, your IP that we need to extract with you. Clear team process is on a big bid. I'll have a team workshop. We'll set the way we're going to behave. We're going to set how we're going to answer questions, how we're going to challenge each other, all those rules, so you create a culture in the team that everybody's working to the same outcome, and we set a goal. And they set the goal. We just manage that process. We talked about governance engagement. I got doorstopped on a project when an overseas government governance process kicked in, and it put us back about 8 weeks. It was a big project, but it put us back about that long. It's really easy to start the format stuff and have a writer start and all the generic stuff. Get that out of the way at the start so that you're not putting in all the generic content, and don't write BUMF. You're creating work for Defence if you put a whole lot of stuff in there that actually is all about you and not about them. This is the solution they're looking for. Present that solution in a way that identifies your benefit and why they should be wanting to talk to you at the end of this RFP process and, if possible, contract. Talked about the wider organisation, the peer review, and deadline fever. Answer the question. So I've got one of these owners in this little company over here who's a marketer, right? So he just loves to tell stories. He'll write 10 pages and we'll put it in as one. Our bid writer will take it down to one. So he's learned not to write anything, and he's now interviewed by our bid writer with this opportunity because he's got the relationship, and then she writes the story, and she's part of that team, and it works really, really well. And he knows now that put the pen down, Alan, and just deal with the team. One of, I think, the best things that I could advise, if nothing else, is if you're dealing with a defence procurement opportunity and it's going to impact on a sailor or an airman or a soldier or somebody in defence, tell the story from that impact point of view. I think in conversation over the years that the difference in our response in the ACCA proposal and in some of the other work we do is we're able to, I mean, one of my clients, we won the hearing aid contract for New Zealand from the Ministry of Health. And all we talked about throughout the bid was what the benefit to a deaf person or a hearing impaired person would be. In the ACCA clothing contract, if you read that submission, it's all about this is the soldier, this is the sailor, this is the airman, this is how it's going to work. This is the process benefits to them. This is the delivery benefits. This is the quality of uniform. This is how they're going to order it. This is how it'll be repaired. This is where they pick it up on base. This is how they get the badges sewn on. All of that stuff means you understand what's happening. If you're looking at some of these big capability platforms and you look at some of the things that are really smart technology going around those, what's the benefit to the organisation and the individuals who are going to have to work with this capability that you're providing? We talked about compliant response. Other things in there, I talked about paying attention to detail with that wrong branding. That was a classic. How to lose. It's really easy. Assume you've won. Oh, this is us. It's written for us. And you don't put the effort in. And I have seen clients, I don't know how we lost that. It was written for us. Why didn't we? Well, they wrote it. They put it in the bid office. They didn't have a relationship. All of those things will be reasons that you could lose. Don't assume where there's a question. Make sure you ask the question. Don't get on your hobby horse. It's their need, your client's need is defence. What are the things that you can really deliver that's going to add value? Not the story you want to tell, but the story you need to tell. Copy and paste from prior bids. I talked about that. Tailor it to this opportunity. I don't know if you do, but what you should be doing is asking for feedback on every bid you've submitted, whether you've won or lost, having that debrief, and we have a lessons learned register from all of the bids we've done, and as a result, we're able to advise those clients. These are the things we learned last time with you. What are we doing differently now? Evaluation criteria, deadline fever. Bidding is part of market development, but it's not sales. And that's a classic mistake. I can tell you what you can have. You need this from me. No, what do you need? How can I meet that need? What's my solution? What's my output going to be for you? I've moved a little bit from bid management now. I suppose goes back to implementing things in a bit of a change management project that I did in the Commonwealth Bank. But so I'm more of a change manager implementation and a trainer around that stuff. But one of the things that I would strongly encourage you to do, and I've talked about it already, is that implementation focus. How are you going to go from current state to future state with what you are proposing? Because then I can see, if you put yourself in the defence shoes when you are writing these things, walk in their shoes for a while and understand that experience. And then look, how's this going to look? We're going from here to there. How am I going to change it? The first day that we opened Yaka, we had all of the B trains coming from all the clothing stores around the country into Albany. And we got a call. There was a new Air Force commander going to meet the Queen, I can't remember, there was some senior officer going to meet some senior, and I'm pretty sure it was the Queen in London. And we needed to get a new Aguilette, and it was somewhere in a main freight B train on its way back to Auckland. That wasn't particularly clever. We actually ended up getting one made, but that was not particularly clever. We should have thought about what's the reserve contingency stock going to be required while that stock's in transition? Get people to up order a little bit in advance and hold more stock in the clothing stores as we destock those clothing stores. Simple little things, but think about implementation issues. Change management impact on people. Change management impact on process. Change management impact to deliver benefits. And your risk and issues around that. It's a jigsaw. It's a lot of fun. It's an amazing feeling when you win, and when you win the significant opportunities that are being presented to Defence, by Defence to you at the moment. But it's really frustrating, and it's too late when you lose. So don't plan to lose, plan to win. Plan to engage now, right through till the end of 2035. And we've seen procurements being planned for next year. Don't wait till the RFP's out. Don't wait till it's on Gets. Make sure you're doing that early engagement. I tend to operate off mantras quite a lot, and this is the only one that really matters to me. In business sense, in a life sense, you have to make choices. And we make choices about what we do, we make choices about getting out of bed every morning, we make all those. But you can't do everything that you want to do in your life. You've got to pick the things that you want to do, and it's the same with going after market opportunities. You can have anything that you want if you want it badly enough. And this is Mandela's famous quotation. You can have anything you want, not just everything you want. And it goes on in his autobiography. It talks about select, commit, plan, and focus, and you will be amazed. And it works. If we go for everything, no, less is more. This is what I want. This is where I'm going to put my resources. This is the opportunity I want. This is the bid that I'm going to win. These are the no-bid strategies. This is my team. I'm going to engage them. This is who can help. We can do it ourselves. All of those are fine. But if you know what you want and you target it, you focus on it, you pre-plan it, you pre-engage, you build those relationships. First name terms with lots of people in Defence. First name terms with lots of people that are your prime opportunities across the listed prime vendors for Defence. You will have what you want, but you can't have everything. So that's pretty much the masterclass on bid strategy. I'm interested in, we're a bit time tight, but food's out there. Happy to answer any questions or have a conversation. It was a bit of a didactic sort of session, which isn't usually me, but hopefully it's given you some thoughts and things that you might be able to focus on. Any questions that anybody's interested in particular? Things you would. We cover the bases, do you think? Yeah, sure.
Find you for questions.
Okay. About 15 minutes till we're due back with the panel. So thanks everybody for coming, and let me know if I can help. Thank you.